Anciently, God made a special covenant with Abraham that his children would be as numerous as the sands of the sea, that they would have promised lands, rights to the priesthood, and the authority to administer the ordinances of salvation to all men. Everyone who would receive the gospel covenant would be counted as Abraham's family. God renewed that covenant with Isaac and again with Jacob. Jacob's sons became the 12 tribes of Israel, through whom that covenant and bloodline continued. Eventually, the tribes of Israel, the family of Abraham, became unfaithful to the covenant and were scattered from their lands, dispersed, and lost. God has promised repeatedly through time that He would gather again the family of Jacob or Israel, and with the restoration of the gospel, that time has come.
One of the things that I tell people is read your Old Testament. Read Genesis. Read Exodus. That's family history for us. Read Isaiah, as Jesus commanded the Nephites and thus us to do. Understand it. That's the book that gives you the great plan for the scattering and gathering. The Old Testament, the core testament of our standard works, is a family history for the Latter-day Saints. An ancient family history, but every bit as much our family history as anything that happened 100 or 200 years ago. And the more we come to understand that, the more we'll understand why the work is happening the way it's happening now. The topic or the concept of the gathering of Israel is first addressed in the Restoration in the coming forth of the Book of Mormon, because it is in the Book of Mormon where there are lengthy quotes from the prophet Isaiah, both by Nephi at the outset of the book in the record of Nephi, and also by the risen Jesus when he appears to the Nephites after his resurrection in Jerusalem. And in both cases, the scattering and the gathering of Israel is the primary topic of the Isaiah passages and the interpretations of both Nephi and Jesus. And it's a concept that's already on the mind of the prophet Joseph Smith at the time that the church is restored, organized in April 1830, and some of the earliest of the restoration or revelations that we have in the Doctrine and Covenants that come through the prophet Joseph Smith deal with the topic of the elect of Israel being gathered, and the notion of people converting to the early Mormon church was understood as the gathering of Israel. From the very beginning, Israel was being gathered, and that was the act of bringing people into the church. Sunday, April 3rd, 1836, toward the end of the week of the dedication of the temple in Kirtland, Prophet Joseph Smith, Oliver Cowdery in the temple, they receive the visitation of Jesus, recorded in section 110, who accepts the house as his own. And then 3 other visitants appear and, from our understanding of what's happening, transfer keys to Joseph and Oliver. Melchizedek priesthood keys, which will empower the apostolic priesthood they had received 7 years earlier from Peter, James, and John. What are these keys? Moses, the keys for the gathering of Israel and the restoration of the lost tribes. Until 1836, the church had operated really quite locally. Within the United States, a little dip into Canada here and there, a mission to the Lamanites westward from Ohio, but had not ventured beyond the shore. With the keys of Moses, the worldwide missionary work gets underway. Apostles are sent beginning in 1837 to England, and that begins the step-by-step moving into every country of the earth where we can go to preach the gospel and to gather Israel. And again, the missionary work is the gathering of Israel. And it was not until Moses brought back those keys for the gathering of Israel and the restoration of the lost tribes that we began really to start thinking outside our borders and moving into the 4 corners of the earth. It is interesting, particularly, that Joseph had already been thinking of the gathering of the Jewish people to their ancient homeland in Jerusalem. And he mentioned this in the prayer over the Kirtland Temple in section 109. And that then is also empowered by the appearance of Moses in the temple in Kirtland. Almost all historians of the Zionist movement will look to the period just before 1850 as a period when this mystical desire began to rise in the communities of Jews in Eastern Europe, in old Russia, and even in places throughout the Middle East where they were living, Yemen, Baghdad, and others, that they should somehow relocate to Palestine. There was this remarkable feeling of Jewish gathering that comes about just at the same time that Joseph Smith has received these keys. I don't think, as a specialist in Jewish studies, that this is a coincidence. In the beginning of the Restoration, it was important for those who were converted to gather to where the church was. We had to gain a critical mass. The saints were gathering first to the small congregations in New York. Then Kirtland became a rather robust center of gathering. The idea of gathering to Missouri was important for a time. And then perhaps the biggest in terms of what happened during the lifetime of the prophet Joseph Smith was the gathering of the saints from England and other places to Nauvoo, from whence we had a springboard to the west. Then, of course, for several decades, we would gather to these hills of Zion in the west. But really, beginning in the 20th century, and particularly after World War II, the message increasingly became blossom where you're planted, okay? The gathering is to Zion, but Zion has stakes. As a tent has a center post, but also has cords which reach way out to the stakes which hold it into the ground, Zion has a center place, but those stakes are every bit as much a part of the structure as the center pole. And this is using, by the way, the metaphor out of Isaiah, which says that Zion is to lengthen her cords and strengthen her stakes because the family's going to grow bigger. So you're going to need a bigger tent, longer cords, stronger stakes. And that metaphor is understood in our time to mean that converts to the church are gathering not to a physical place of Zion, but to a kingdom of Zion, to the church, wherever it is. And we've established stakes in every corner of the world. They need not come to Utah anymore. They need not come to the United States anymore, which is where the work started out. We have more members outside the United States than inside the United States, and that's only going to grow because Zion is where the pure in heart dwell. But focusing in on any one geographical location misses the point that Zion is the pure in heart. Zion is the Latter-day Saints gathered to the church wherever the church is. Okay? And so there may indeed be another church headquarters built in Missouri. There may indeed be one built in Jerusalem. There may indeed be one built in Washington, D.C., in Tokyo, in Beijing. All of these will be Zion. And to focus on any one of them, even though it was important in our pioneer history, would be to miss what the future has for the growth of the Church of Jesus Christ. Because it will be worldwide. Zion is everywhere where the Latter-day Saints are gathering and perfecting themselves. The first thing that the prophet Joseph tries to make clear in the Restoration in terms of people coming to the church is that they are the literal descendants of the ancient tribes of Israel. And obviously this means that they have that as a heritage, a genealogical, physical, biological heritage. and that they are now being gathered in that they are being made aware of their identity. And this is really what the gathering is. I teach my students that the ancient tribes of Israel did not become lost because they did not know where they were, but because they almost immediately forgot who they were. But there are only two groups of people on earth that identify that way and that feel it's meaningful. Jewish people do, because they are descendants of ancient Israel who were never lost. They were scattered, but that doesn't mean they were lost. And they've always remembered that they were of ancient Israel and had the heritage of Abraham and the right to that covenant. The other group that understands themselves to be descended from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are the Latter-day Saints. But unlike Jews, our heritage is not a remembered heritage through many centuries. Our heritage is a restored heritage. We are taught through the restoration and through teachers that understand the concept that we, Gentile though we be, are also descended from ancient Israel, and upon claiming and covenanting those rights, they become ours, and we become Israel. And so what we do in the restoration is we bring people to the church, and part and parcel of teaching the gospel and accepting it is to understand that we are heirs of the ancient gospel covenants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and therefore in our living, in our keeping of the commandments, and in our temple work, we identify as such. The highest ordinances that we have in the house of the Lord give us the ultimate blessings of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. In keeping those covenants, we are keeping the covenants of Israel and therefore have the right to those blessings of eternal life and royalty in the celestial realm. So this is a very big thing in the house of the Lord, to be identified as the royal children of Israel with the covenants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And yet we talk of it so sparingly nowadays in Sunday school, in young men, young women, that we actually have a hard time with our young people when they have questions. What is my patriarchal blessing really for? What does it mean to gather or to be involved in the gathering of Israel? It's not a concept that we teach very clearly. In summary, the gathering is to discover, identify with, and live the covenants of the restored gospel of Jesus Christ until the ultimate covenants become the blessings in your life, your marriage for eternity, your family, and living until the last day of your life. You know, it's possible to become ungathered. Some in ancient Israel, even in the time of Moses, became ungathered, and it's possible for that to happen too. The gathering is not only to become a part of gathered Israel, but to endure to the end with this program.